I would argue a restaurant marketer may have the toughest marketing job in the world. And the reason being is everything impacts a restaurant marketer. In the case of, we do a lot of e-commerce here at Nift. An e-commerce person, there's a lot of things they have to worry about. But at the end of the day, the product's going to be pretty good. So yes, there may be small defects. At the end of the day, your flow, once you get it, reduce the friction, it's easy to convert. In a restaurant, you've got a lot of variables. You've got the product ultimately is made by individuals who may be having good days, maybe having bad days. So you got to worry about your experience on that front from what the product is day to day. And that's why in the restaurant space, reviews are so critical to keep a pulse on it. But you also have the aspect of, if you're not taken out or QSR, the bigger part of the experience is the service. And this is one that I learned. I was at Hard Rock for 13 years, ended up as head of global marketing, is certainly a hot food, cold beverages is important. But the variable that in our research was that experience.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the eMarketing Association. My day job is I run Did It, full-service marketing agency. Nift is actually a client of ours, so I'm super excited to have Brian Siemienas on this week as a podcast guest. He runs the restaurant side of Nift as Vice President of Restaurant Solutions. So before we get into the Nift specifics within restaurants, you've been involved in restaurant marketing for a long time. So I'd love for you to talk about how the challenges are very different, not just based on whether it's sort of QSR versus casual dining versus luxury dining, but also based on sort of the sizes of restaurants and how the challenges in their marketing and customer acquisition differ depending on where they are in the ecosystem.
Yeah, well, first off, Kevin, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to spend time here, talking with you. And, to your question, yes, unfortunately, or fortunately, I've had a 20 plus year career in the hospitality and restaurant business. And as you look at it, certainly right now, as we're sitting here in 2024, it's not a great time to be a restaurant marketer or restaurant operator in most brands. There's certainly success stories that you're seeing. And, in the industry as a whole, restaurants, it's a tough business to begin with. Everyone thinks, oh, it's easy to be a restaurant operator, open a restaurant. The reality is 60 to 70% of restaurants fail within the first couple of years. So, you see that, and from the get-go, it's difficult. Then you start getting into the current situation of traffic problems. And where traffic's so important is there's a lot of little mechanisms you can pull. You can raise pricing, which the industry has done over the past couple of years of inflation, but eventually consumers say, okay, we've had enough. A restaurant is not something, yes, we have to eat, but we don't have to eat at a restaurant. There's multiple options. And, the pie in the US, and I was fortunate, international, a very different story because the pie is growing with growth in middle classes around the world. But in the US, the overall pie is not increasing very much. So everyone's battling for the same customer. You can't say organically you're going to have 10% growth because of population. So as a restaurant marketer in a vacuum, everyone else is in the same boat as you are. You're fighting to keep your current customers, and you're fighting even harder to get your competitors' customers. So it becomes very difficult and very challenging. And I would argue a restaurant marketer may have the toughest marketing job in the world. And the reason being is everything impacts a restaurant marketer. In the case of, we do a lot of e-commerce here at Nift. An e-commerce person, there's a lot of things they have to worry about. But at the end of the day, the product's going to be pretty good. So yes, there may be small defects. At the end of the day, your flow, once you get it, reduce the friction, it's easy to convert. In a restaurant, you've got a lot of variables. You've got the product ultimately is made by individuals who may be having good days, maybe having bad days. So you got to worry about your experience on that front from what the product is day to day. And that's why in the restaurant space, reviews are so critical to keep a pulse on it. But you also have the aspect of, if you're not taken out or QSR, the bigger part of the experience is the service. And this is one that I learned. I was at Hard Rock for 13 years, ended up as head of global marketing, is certainly a hot food, cold beverages is important. But the variable that in our research was that experience. You could get by with okay food and beverage with stellar service, and the likelihood and all those key metrics were critical. Whereas there's not many other places. If I was in the mall yesterday, I do every once in a while have to go to buy certain things, but I didn't care as long as a person, hello, thank you. I didn't care about the interaction with the person checking me out. So it's a much easier, whereas in the restaurant, and it's just so critical. So from a restaurant marketing standpoint, you hit all the gamuts depending on your responsibilities, from the actual product and the food to, as you mentioned, the customer experience. Most recently, when in the industry, there was a shortage of servers. And as a consumer, you probably experienced it. You walk in a restaurant, we're on an hour wait, and half the restaurant's empty.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't get servers. Well, our number one marketing initiative that year was recruiting and getting staff members. So you got to worry about that operation. So it's a lot of gamuts that you've got to be worried about. And then as top of additional challenges, most restaurant marketing budgets, the margins are so tight in the restaurant industry, depending on your concept, it may be from 1% to 4% of your total revenue you're spending on marketing, which in some cases could be a rather small number. So you throw all this together, and then some of the challenges that have come up, from the aspect when you look at advertising options, with the privacy laws, obviously Google's reversed some of the course on the cookies. Whether that stands, smarter people than me are going to figure out what the government does on that. But, to me, one of the biggest, daggers was when Meta stopped allowing restaurants to, via their geo, see if I hit someone with a geo campaign, were they within the vicinity of my restaurant? That ended in May of 2022, because at that point I was CMO at Margaritaville and Landshark. We operated 28 in the US. We weren't able to, we had very little online ordering, relatively speaking. So for us to be able to track what was working, what wasn't, literally overnight went away. And as we know, in a lot of these platforms, what worked today may not work tomorrow if there's an algorithm tweak. And then take away the fact, if, in the e-commerce world, if your listeners couldn't track someone ordering via email or something, imagine trying to figure out what's happening. So, to answer, there's a lot of challenges in the restaurant space, a lot of, budget challenges in some cases. And then you've got some brands that, unfortunately, over the years, COVID resulted in a lot of cutbacks, because it wasn't okay, we don't want to do the right thing. It's, are we going to be in business tomorrow? So, there's some brands that couldn't reinvent themselves, had to cut back, and you hit all of this, and you may have a consumer perception of what your brand is that you need to overcome. And a lot of the people we talk with, it's, okay, I know what we need to do. It's, how do we move quick enough? Do we have the resources? And most importantly, how do we let the general consumer know? Because once you get a perception, it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort to try to change that in a consumer.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed is the variability in how restaurants of all sizes and types handle, I guess, for lack of a better term, CRM, which is, having databases of their customers and then continuing to market to those customers, right? Because it sounds like, from what you're saying, that it's really a share of wallet battle, right? Yep. Either within a particular tier like QSR or within a particular tier, whatever it is. And, the consumer is basically allocating a certain number of nights per week or budget to going out. Right. Yeah. And so the restaurants have to fight over that, as opposed to creating new opportunities to get people to go out. And given that, it sounds like CRM would be really important, but I don't feel like most restaurants, other than like the old school CRM, which is I walk into the deli and they know that I like roast beef with honey mustard, right? That level of CRM, like that they don't really have a good handle on the customers, right? I mean, they may, from the regulars, right? Everybody wants a regular. But technology, as it relates to getting those regulars to become regulars, really impacts the marketing channels that they pick. Because if they either don't know that they've become a regular and have a high lifetime customer value, or they're driving in the dark, right?
Yeah.
Then they can't even allocate marketing budgets correctly into trying to find the kinds of people that become regulars. I sort of feel like restaurants fell into this sort of Groupon trap, thinking that was going to result in regulars, but it was quite the opposite, right? It would usually result in just the deal shopper who would only ever go to the restaurant if they got a deal, and that put them underwater, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you feel like the restaurants have come around to this idea of really understanding CRM and lifetime customer value as it relates to their marketing channels?
Yeah. So a lot of different aspects. And I think, yes, they have, but the ability to execute on that is very different based on,
Right.
the concepts. And, the one thing you mentioned, which is, even more challenging now, talking about the share of wallet, is you're absolutely right there. But what you're seeing now in the industry, and it varies based on income levels.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of say 75,000 is sort of the magic number. That as a society, a lot of people borrow, live on credit, and paycheck to paycheck. Well, you're seeing now that it's not only the share of wallet of what they were doing, they're having to cut back because they just don't have the money anymore. So, for that share of wallet, you're losing what percentage depends on what incomes you're at. Certainly, if you're a high-end steakhouse, may not be as drastic. But if you're QSR, where you're seeing sub 50,000 people, they're really the ones being hit. And part of the value menu strategy that you're seeing everyone racing as fast as possible to what I like to say is now the $5 magic number. And it's all about getting traffic. And, those same people that were maybe average checks at $10 weren't able to go out as much. But to your point on the, CRM, and it races the gamut. There's a lot of in the industry, and I've worked on 3 different loyalty programs, have launched 2 in the US, 1 globally, and totally get the value of what I like to say, and not so much loyalty, is just first party customer data. And in the industry, you hear all about the third party. There's 2 problems with the third party, and that being the Uber, the DoorDashes, the Grubhubs, is as a restaurant, you lose control of the consumer.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't get the data. You end up paying. Hopefully, you're big enough that you can negotiate a good rate. But there's plenty of places out there that are paying 30% plus having to offer discounts. And you start figuring out a margin, even if it's a marketing cost, it starts becoming difficult.
Sure.
But to the point of where that first party data is so critical, and at Nift, as we built the product out for restaurants. When I joined the company about a year ago, very successful in the e-commerce side, and Ellery, your prior episode, shared just all the incredible things that they're able to do. But on the restaurant side, it was really single unit location. So, we built it out for all those frustrations that restaurant marketers have. Right now, every restaurant marketer, their biggest commodity is their time. There's so many things, as I mentioned prior, that they have to worry about. It's okay, not that I don't think this is important. It's where does this fall in my long list of, I like to say it's a stovetop, except it's not 4 burners, it's 20 burners, all at different stages of boiling over or grease fires going. So it's balancing all of that on a day-to-day basis. But in the CRM aspect, you also have the aspect of all the technology. It's a double-edged sword. There's certain technology that just makes life so much easier when it's used right, but it's also overwhelming as a restaurant marketer is looking. And you talk on the CRM side, loyalty. I'm one that loyalty is important for trying to get more out of your customers. And selfishly, it's a way of restaurants to track customers and what are they doing. If you've got enough money and you can maybe do credit card tracking, last 4 digits. There's other tools out there, but they can be a lot of cost, a lot of investment. Likewise, some of those are saying, if we were to talk a year ago, it's all about loyalty. That was the buzzword in the industry. Some were pushing, get rid of your email database. Well, thankfully, we've gotten smarter. I'm one of, at the end of the day, I want to reach a consumer. And first and foremost, whether it's B2C, B2B, we're all consumers in some aspect. And, try to remind people, okay, share you as a consumer. If I go somewhere once or have never been there, I'm not going to sign up for your loyalty right away. I'm not going to, or my favorite is, you got to download an app to become a member of loyalty. an app's nice, and I use my Starbucks app anytime I order because I'm impatient and I don't like waiting in line. And they made it very easy if I'm at my house or if I'm on the road. So there's definitely uses for that. But at the end of the day, if a consumer wants to give you information about them, hey, I'm interested in your brand, I want to hear about it. Do I care whether I got to do an email campaign or a loyalty campaign? I want it because the cost to try to reach that consumer via whatever other outlet is so costly. And again, they may not be one that comes in all the time or weekly or what you would call a regular or loyal member. But if you're doing your job and you got an LTO that intrigues them, why not for, and I know it's not free, but an email campaign is pretty inexpensive relative to all media. So why wouldn't you allow them to share that? So from the aspect as we, built Nift on the restaurant side, that first party data is a critical aspect. And, how we've structured it versus other options out there. And I'm one, it's not zero out, come solely with Nift. It's, we're trying to get a share of the wallet of what restaurant companies are spending on media. And the way we built it, if we look at the comparison in the digital channels, you've got, impressions, you've got clicks. And I hate using the word impressions because, we all got our phone, and I can't do it because I'm older and have my reading glasses, but my kids, what they're counting as impressions, I'm like, how do you even read what that is? So in Nift, it's one of those, and through our platform, which is a gifting, we use the same variable, but this is not something where, we're sharing content and throw ads in there. A person solely has come in to understand when they receive a Nift from one of our gifting partners. I wasn't expecting it. It was a delight and surprise, and it's a different experience. So from an impression standpoint, the amount of time people are engaging with our gift options is much longer than what other digital media are comparing as impressions. Secondly, when they select, and that's in our model where the cost transaction happens. So you're getting the impressions and awareness and exploration of your brands. Once they select the gift, we're sending people to the website of the brand wherever you designate. And that's something we've recently added as we evolve and get feedback from our partners. But more importantly, you're getting the first party data for that database opportunity. If you have it, some have it, some don't. We can grow and get as sophisticated as a partner wants. So, from the aspect, you're getting that first party data. And again, I hate to use the term lead because I get pitched every day when I was on the restaurant side. Hey, you want these leads? These are people that are actually engaged with your brand, that given an option, chose something else. And we did a lot of call out research because ultimately, I know what restaurants are looking for. It's you got to get a sale. So understanding the consumers we're bringing in is these people have full intention of using it, of learning about the brand, or if it's a lapsed user, using it again, but life gets in the way. And depending on the gift, some of our partners in the QSR space, if it's a free burger or a $5 or $10 voucher, a lot different than some of our casual that are giving you a $25 voucher. And, think about it. We've all been there where, I really want to go here. We hang on to it, and then we end up, it expires or we don't get to use it. So from that aspect, we allow restaurants based on whatever their abilities are. If it's and some don't at CRM at all, believe it or not. So they can go there. And we've got some that, of course, do the retargeting. There's those that select. We're seeing about 5 to 20% ultimately end up in the restaurants. So you think about the CRM campaign, doing a campaign. Sorry, Kevin, you were unable to visit. Hey, Kevin, thanks for visiting. Some will try to sign you up for your loyalty. Hopefully you have a great time. Again, depending on what their ability is. And when we look at it, we want to be there. And you introduced me as, heading the restaurant division. I actually have a co-partner in crime. His name is Preston Younger, and he's more of the sales and the go-to-market expertise. I'm the subject matter expert on the restaurants, and we're a great partnership. And he was early on in Yelp and a lot of startups, seven rooms. So we partner together and both have a passion for the restaurant industry. I get asked quite a bit, what do you hope to do? What do I hope to do is I hope to help these restaurants and help people that were in the shoes that I was of every day. are, okay, how am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to not have sleepless nights of what did sales look like yesterday? And, Nift, is it for everyone? No. But as we've built it, and when I say, is it for everyone? If you're looking for impressions, there's more practical ways if that's what you're looking for. But if you're, as you mentioned, some of those things, if you're looking for filling the funnel with good quality people and getting to the point of growing your database, getting them to your website to discover your brand, and ultimately being able to track, whether it's in restaurant, we also have the ability of online. It's a nice, clean pathway that we can work with restaurants and deliver what's important to them.
Yeah, one thing that the great points there. As I was sort of thinking about the difference between the DTC, like I have Truth Nutrition, a brand that I own in the nutraceutical category, and obviously being DTC, geography is really important because it predicts things like wealth and income and certain other demographics and psychographics. So location matters, but in the restaurant business, location really matters, right? Because the person really can only fulfill through either delivery or visit, to the location. And so I'd love to hear from you, like how that changes how your pitch into the restaurant community differs from, your cohorts who are doing the pitches to the Truth Nutritions of the world, right? Saying, hey, this is a great way for you to, stimulate trial of your product or service in a fulfillment that doesn't require location. So do you find that restaurant marketers should really focus in pretty narrowly on geography? Like, is there a certain sweet spot in distance that matters between sort of the location of the person receiving a Nift and their redemption level and their their delight with receiving a Nift?
Yeah. So from that aspect, you're 100% on. Is at the end of the day, if you're in e-commerce, unless maybe you're an alcohol, a wine, and there's legal restrictions, you can pretty much hit anywhere unless there's a state you don't want to ship to for tax reasons. But it doesn't matter. Whereas in our world, it absolutely 100% matters. And it's a depend answer. And again, flexibility as we built out this product. And if you think about it, and I'll throw some brands out there. So Cheesecake Factory, there may be one or two in a market. So you can go on a much larger radius to go to a Cheesecake Factory or call those destination brands. I worked at Darden at Yard House, so you can go a 10, 15, 20-mile radius of trying to hit customers about the brand. But if you're in a QSR where they're maybe on every corner, it's a very different story. And, you may only have a 5-mile radius. So the great thing about the product, and as I said, it was built originally for the single locations and, brick and mortar. So as we came in, we took that mindset and we built the product recognizing, even if you're a big chain, you're going to have different problems in different markets, or maybe even in the same market, because you may have, I'm down in Orlando, Florida. The east side of Orlando is very different than when I live in the southwest side down by the Universal and Disney. So we've built the product where if you were let's say a 30-unit chain, you could treat each individual location for a different problem. And for example, some of the problems we see with our partners is, I'm doing a lot of third-party delivery. I really would like that data. So what can we do is we can launch with a partner that it's a direct ordering only if you have that ability on your website. What does that do? That gets them out of that habit of I'm going to go to a third party and do it, which can be very valuable. We can be an awareness builder, market entry. One of the things I loved, at both Darden and Hard Rock is a lot of it was market entry. You're working on awareness, and you, depending on the brand, if you're very well known, and there's some of those hot button brands, the minute they open a Raising Cane's, you're going to be packed. But there's a lot of brands that maybe aren't known or are popular in other parts of the country. So you want to get maximum awareness. And we can tool that where we go a little bit of a larger radius and, recognizing that the farther away the funnel on the visitation may not be as good, but we can do that with the partners. And a lot of it is understanding what their needs. And I use the term partners. I know the attorneys will say they're not partners or advertisers, but to me, a win-win relationship is a partnership. So I'll put the asterisk partnerships of how I treat it versus the legal definition. But to your point, that radius is going to vary, and it's truly understanding what's important to them. we've got one partner that is working on redoing their menu. So the awareness, the checking out their website, seeing the new menu items are actually slightly more important than the ultimate visitation, because they want to get that, hey, our menu's different than the brand that you've known for the past 20 years. And all that comes down to the location, the geography. And we do have a couple partners where in some parts of town, they have different offers because they have different goals. And we've set that up that you can treat it, all your locations as a DMA, if that's what you want to do, because it's consistent problems, or you can treat individual locations. And like I said, as we did it, and as Preston and I worked on this product, and our CEO, Ellery, has been fantastic, because it was, okay, come in, we want you guys to use your expertise based on what problems were you facing when you sat in that chair. And we were able to do it, which is flexibility for what the needs are and recognizing what's important based on those needs. Yeah. And we, I think have done a pretty good job. The great thing is our partners, we're always getting feedback. Our development team and our team that works on the product, literally we're, hey, can we do this tweak? Can we do that tweak? I mentioned to you sending to the website. That's a feature on feedback that we didn't have. And it was like, okay, if you think about the gifting process, I wasn't expecting this. Don't know when it is. All of a sudden I've got a voucher that a gift that I pick, and the voucher pops up right in front of me. In e-commerce, it's important because a lot of people will go make that purchase right away. What we're finding in some of our concepts, QSR is a little bit different than casual dining. It may be 15 to 17 days before they redeem that. So if I'm sitting here I just ate lunch, or at 10 a.m., I don't need to see the voucher because we're texting that to you. So it's like, what can deliver value to our partners? Let's send them to whatever web page they want exposure for. So hopefully someone will continue that digging, investigating, and also, I'm going to go use this Nift voucher.
So one thing that from those folks who haven't received the Nift yet, they can obviously try to experience it through one of your publishing type partners. But it's sort of a fixed value, right? And one of the things that's sort of similar around, gift certificates, right, which are also pretty common in the restaurant world, is that the restaurateur is sort of excited about that because they know that, for a family in particular, the overall check size for a family of 4 or a bigger party will, considerably exceed what that gift certificate was, whether they sold that gift certificate for cash or whether it's sort of a Nift style gift certificate, right? I'm sure that the dynamics must be somewhat similar in that, if you can get the people in, there will be some incremental check size above the Nift value. Have you found that differs pretty dramatically based on whether it's sort of a high-end luxury dining versus, casual dining versus QSR?
Yeah, so certainly as we look at the products and there's all those differences, check average really is one of the big variables.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, if you're going on those high-end steakhouse dining, they tend to could be $50, $100, depending which brand you pick per person.
Right.
And if you think about the use, you're not going to go do that by yourself. Some people do. They may sit at the bar. I've done it when I've been traveling on the road. But for the most part, if I'm home, I'm not going to go to a Capital Grille by myself. So it's a destination. But when you get to the QSR, a lot of those do tend to be maybe by myself. So it's more of a, trial and getting people in there. As I said, with a lot of, if you think of that QSR, it's all about the frequency and getting them in, getting into that habit, that repetition. And one of the things I, failed to mention earlier on Nift that's built in, which I absolutely love, is I would hate when I'm spending media dollars and it's like, okay, am I getting the same people, or am I getting my existing customer and discounting or giving them an offer? With Nift, we offer the ability to suppress anyone already in your database. So that's truly, we're bringing net new customers to your database. Not to say it's one of those customers that maybe you don't have their info, but again, it's very important. So, when it comes to the average check, it really depends on the concept and that upsell ability and how people use. And a couple of our casual dining partners, we're actually seeing 30-40% higher check averages than we are with their normal customer.
Oh, that's interesting.
And, a big part of it, anything in restaurant marketing, when you do an offering or a BOGO, you're going to have two different, types of clients. And you had asked earlier about some of the spaces that used to be that discounting. And I think it's important, to explain here. I worked for brands that didn't like to be positioned as discount brands,
Right.
and we've done a lot on the restaurant side. And the great thing about Nift is, for a brand that doesn't want to be viewed as a discount brand, you can still work with us, and you're not discounting,
Right.
because in the case of a Park Mobile or a TripAdvisor or a Planet Fitness, a consumer, and we call them a voucher because in a lot of states you get the gift certificates, they aren't purchased. It's a voucher. It has an
Yeah.
expiration of 30 days. But if you're getting it from Planet Fitness, you're not viewing it as whatever brand is discounting you. You're
Yeah.
viewing it as, I got a gift. And it's something that it takes a little bit of time for the restaurant marketers as we talk to them. Some get it instantly, but some will, we aren't a discount brand. Well, you're not discounting. And the reality is most brands, unfortunately nowadays, there's a few exceptions, are having a discount, having to offer the value meals. So as we look at that, it's certainly a big value for the restaurants, positioning wise. And we've seen it over the years. And you talked about it in some of your past episodes, where the brands, and there's one that's no longer with us, if you didn't have the 20 to 30% off coupon, I don't know if I ever saw anyone shop there without it. So you don't want to get there. And I saw it early on at my days at Hard Rock, is when traffic would go down. And this was back, I'm dating a little bit, when the FSIs were actually in those newspapers we would get delivered. So we ended up needing to do a BOGO FSI, which was the ultimate in discounts. And we joked at the time, it was like an adrenaline shot. But the problem is, it would work. You'd see your traffic skyrocket, and then it'd come back to normal. In an ideal world, you'd want to see it, increase, but we just weren't getting that. Well, what would happen the next year comes along, and you're going year over year comparison, and you'd have to do it again. Well, right. And every company, whether you're publicly traded, private equity, no one says, hey, we're good if we maintain sales, because your costs go up and everything. Well, what you have to do is you get into a second one, and it's just one of those downhill spirals. So when you talk about the mass discounting and the discount hunter, again, that's very important, because I've been there, I've experienced it, I've made the mistake where you get the quality of customer that isn't going to help you. Certainly top line sales are always good, but it doesn't do good if there's no sales once you discount it. So that's a very important thing. And one of the pillars we're working with our partners is, how do we get enough data to be able to go in and identify, here's the good customers that are behaving the way we want all the way through the funnel. And you're always going to get the discount hunters. It doesn't matter where you are. The nice thing in our world, you can't go Google, how do I get a Nift? So it's not something where you're going to be able to hunt this down. It's algorithm based. Once you see one, you can't get it again if you're an existing. So there's a lot of, as I like to say, magic that people much smarter than me up in Boston, where we're based, are doing. That's making sure we're not getting into that value hunter who's Googling and getting the discount codes. So again, being close-ended. And we're seeing a lot of our partners, as I said, 40% above their average check. And we work with them to ensure getting the best return possible and the results that they want. And again, long-term, we don't have long-term contracts. The great thing is Ellery believes that the product should speak for itself. So if it's one of those, if it's not working, you can get out. It's not you're locked in for the next 6 months or whatever it is. So, it's important that we understand with the restaurants, what's important to them, what can we deliver, and work with them to improve the results and make sure we're performing. Because again, every market's different. Demographics are different in every market. So it's understanding what the right flow and what the right funnel is for them.
Yeah, I my first entrepreneurial venture was a partnership with 3 restaurants back when I was at Stony Brook University. It was called Deliveries Unlimited. You would call one number and get deliveries from any of the 3 venues. But the fascinating thing about it that I didn't even anticipate when I started it was that it essentially ended up being a yield management play for the restaurants, because the students at the university would order at different times than the eat-in diners at the restaurants. And so I was able to secure a discount from the restaurants because, they already had the staff there, right? So there wasn't an incremental headcount cost. There was just the food cost, right? And so as a result, it became sort of an interesting yield management exercise. And then we ended up experimenting with things like promotions to further stimulate order volume at times that were dead, right, for the kitchen.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious whether there's enough data yet for you guys to sort of see some of that same behavior, either because certain demographics tend to eat at different times or, have
Yeah.
different consumption behaviors that the restaurants like.
Yeah. So we work with our partners, and we do have a couple that we have restrictions. So, for example, Friday and Saturday night tend to be, they're packed, they're on reservation. So we've got a couple partners that exempt, and they're in the sit down, finer
Yeah,
dining,
yeah,
that not valid Friday or Saturday nights.
right.
But we do try not to limit it. And I always joked when I would walk in, and when it normally would be a battle with the CFO. Okay, we need to drive traffic from 3 to 5 o'clock. Okay, well, there's very few restaurants you walk in that 3 to 5 o'clock, you couldn't drive a truck through the restaurant and outside of staff not hurt them.
Yeah.
So we have had some partners come on board. I need traffic 3 to 5, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but Thursday starts getting busy and Friday. And it's one that, okay, consumers, again, I always try to say, put yourself in the consumer's perspective.
Right.
I don't want so narrowly tied. And I keep in mind, and I'm going to date myself, but maybe Kevin, Caddyshack. Remember Caddyshack pool day was for like 15 minutes? You don't want to do that to your customers. So we try to open it as broad as possible. But at the end of the day, put the limitations in if it's weekend brunches, whatever it may be, because ultimately we want to see your business succeed.
Right.
So to your point, nowadays, there's very few restaurants that don't have the capacity. So, as you look, and a lot of the brands right now, you're seeing traffic's down. There's a couple that are not in that boat. But, to me, and I was talking to someone the other day, and we were joking, visions in the space, McDonald's and their old headquarters in Oak Brook and now downtown Chicago. We have visions of people just sitting there with calculators and smart analysts. And, when you saw what's happened to them, when you saw what happened with Starbucks, and we're not talking, smaller chains that you're seeing declaring bankruptcy, we're talking the biggest in the industry. So it's a problem universal. And outside of a couple partners on the Friday and Saturday, the response we're getting is, I'll take customers, I'll take the first party data, I'll take the discovery, because as I said earlier, that pot isn't, it's not that it's not growing, it's actually shrinking because people just aren't going out as frequently, and they're being tighter in deciding, where am I going to go? And, as well, maybe investigating a little bit further, what's the menu look like? Am I going to enjoy this since I'm only going out once a month versus 2 times a month? And we really right now are not getting into that problem. Now, our bigger challenge, and Preston and I share it, is the sales side. And, in your world, the easy answer is, oh, I don't deal with that, send it to my agency. So you're the one that gets all those emails on those pitches, is what I joke in the unicorns and rainbows. The number of people who promised and came in and saying, I'm going to solve all your problems, and then, couldn't deliver, or what they said they could do didn't. Thankfully, culturally, Ellery believes in, be honest of what you can do, what you can't do. And, for Nift, we've had people, hey, we're on the verge of declaring bankruptcy. We're barely solvent. We need to make up the 15% traffic. That's a tough order. We're not going to be able to deliver that for most restaurants. But it's one of those that if you're thinking a little longer term on, and again, it's that long term versus short term, when you start getting into the more sophisticated marketing, the customer acquisition costs, that lifetime value, that's not one, if you're worrying about, is a company going to be around in a week? You can't get that quick enough. So it's one of those that we've had some partners where they come to us and they lay out what their goals are. And it's like, listen, we're not going to be able to accomplish that. Here's what we can accomplish. We'd love to work with you, love to help. And, that's one of the things that's important to us, is working with the restaurants and being able to maintain that relationship and long term, because it's much easier to get a great partnership, work together for mutual beneficial. Obviously, we want to deliver results so that we can get compensated for those results. And, it's one that working with these restaurants, it's important to understand what are they able to do. To your earlier question, do they have the CRM ability? Do they have online ordering? And again, some of these things that I was fortunate. I've worked with top brands at Hard Rock, Darden, Margaritaville. We had great systems in place. We had those resources, but there's a lot that just don't. They have to still rely on DoorDash or Uber. They're literally from their website. You go and you go to their website because you want to order something to go. And they're then directing you to a third party that they're paying possibly 25 to 30% when, if they had that ability, you could order direct. So that's really, and you hit the nail on the head earlier, is it hits the gamut of the capabilities of restaurants and what they're able to do, versus what they should be doing.
One thing I think is probably a little bit unique to the restaurant industry as well is you've got a mix from sort of purely corporate owned to a combination of corporate owned and franchise, and then some brands are purely franchise. So I'd imagine for you and the sales team at Nift, you have to sort of be innovative in how you deal with your interactions, depending on where on that continuum the brand is. And you had to innovate about how you work through those challenges?
Yeah. So I've been fortunate to work on both sides. And my final, I was the franchisee of the brand. So I know the intricacies, and how I like to explain it. The difference is, and again, you want to give the why behind the what. But when it was corporate owned, you would give the why behind the what. If you'd still get pushback, it'd be, look at who signs your paycheck ultimately. And, again, you'd want to get feedback, but usually things, when they get baked out, there's a lot of different aspects. In a franchise, and there's different types of franchisees depending on the brand. You've got the big corporate owned, the Flynn Group and others that own thousands of multi-brands. Yes. But then you've got what I like to say is the people like you and I, that I put my family life savings behind a restaurant concept that I decided to franchisee in. It's important to respect those, because at the end of the day, when I was a corporate employee, even if things were bad and awful, I didn't have to worry whether my family was going to be able to eat that night or if my paycheck was going to come. Whereas, those individual franchisees. So back to my point of building it for multi-unit or individual locations, we've got some individual franchisees that we're working with. So we've built it that it could be either route. It could be corporate owned. It could be a franchise location. It could be a mix. We've got one partner that has our system wide, and it's a mix of corporate and franchised. At the end of the day, the product isn't really any different, because again, we treat each location as its own individual. Where it can get a little complicated is depending on the brand. Some brands will franchise where you have the entire DMA of Orlando. Others, in the case of Chick-fil-A and their owner operators, but you only get 2 in a market. So there's some franchising brands that will only give you a couple. And where it gets a little more challenging is if you're, especially in the QSR space, I own the one here, you own the one 3 miles away, and you don't want to do it, but I do. How do you get that overlap? And as we know, people only comprehend a fraction of what they hear or they read, or they don't read at all, which becomes a bigger problem nowadays. So even if we do in 20 font bold, only valid at this location, it's still going to show up at the other one. So that's where we work operationally with them to make sure, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is when the customer walks in, especially under our model, the earlier example, Park Mobile's trying to reward and thank their members. So they're a loyal member of Park Mobile. We want to build the brand at Nift with credibility and treating customers and our advertisers and our gifting partners properly. And the consumer wants to go to the brand to be treated right. So if any one of those, it impacts all three. So it's important to make sure that in the case of franchisees, that they're, if the deal was done through corporate marketing funds, that everyone understands these are going to show up, here's how they work, and buy into the process to make it as smooth as possible for everyone.
Right. Well, other than evaluating Nift as a marketing channel, are there any other things that restaurant marketers should be focused on at the moment that would be sort of advice that you give to them as far as low-hanging fruit in order to be more successful in restaurant marketing?
Yeah, from the the aspect, it's, look out there. And I know you're getting inundated. And I would always try to take a couple hours a week. It would get less and less, maybe an hour, to just look at some of those things out there, keeping up with the trades of what's different. At the end of the day, if you keep doing the same thing and your results keep going the same, you may want to try to mix it up a bit. And I'm not saying, blow up your marketing budget if you're doing, certain things with your digital spend. In some of the markets, I have billboards that still, believe it or not, in some areas are effective, and what I would say more traditional marketing is look at other options. You should always be testing something. And when I say test, is put the time behind it, put the effort. Don't just, I'm going to ignore this, go leave it, sit, and hope it's going to produce results. Mm-hmm. So it's one that it's just so difficult nowadays. And, battling for that shrinking pot, you got to be looking what's new, what's different. I sort of joke back early on when banner ads first showed up. And it was we were in a marketing meeting, and I had the team, and they're like, okay, we need to go off of the traditional. And I'm going to date, it was in mid 2000. We used to be at Hard Rock. It was a lot of the Wear magazines, and back when in the in-room and, different publications that were actually in your hand versus a phone. And some said, oh, we need to go all in on this. And I'm like, okay, let's go test it, because to go all in on something when it isn't proven, when it shows good prospect, just doesn't make sense. Because could you always be more efficient? Could you always be more effective? Could you, if you've got the time, A/B test what you're currently doing? Absolutely. But it's one that we always are trying to introduce something new. As I mentioned, my partner, Preston, when he was early on at Yelp, we were an early adopter of Yelp in New York City. It was something different. And why we did it is, in the meeting I was talking about, someone's like, okay, let's go all in on banner ads. And I said, okay. And I asked the room, and I know everyone looks at Nation's Restaurant News at the time, or a publication similar. Okay, what was the headline banner ad on there? Not one person could tell me what it was, because already they were starting to glaze over, for their purposes. So it was effective, but I was not comfortable putting all my eggs in one basket. And, to that aspect, if you keep maintaining doing the same things you're doing today, and you're seeing the drop in traffic and not results, I would say look at some other options. And of course, selfish plug, we're here at Nift, would love to talk to you and show you what we can do. And again, as I said, no long-term agreements. We want to make it work, and also understand your pains, your small profit margins, and what you're facing.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you joining us and sharing your wisdom across restaurant marketing for folks.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I certainly appreciate it. And anyone who has any questions, more than happy, connect with me on LinkedIn, DM me, would love to, share. And again, we're all in this together, and it's not just on the restaurant side. A lot of businesses are facing challenges, and, just love helping people, love talking with them, and hopefully being able to give them an answer.
Yes. Always be helpful.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.